join me in welcoming Rhonda and our panel.
Thank you, Ellen, for that introduction. I'm so excited about this conversation. And I thought first, just to get to know you a little bit better, so I'm going to start at the end. If you could just tell us briefly, because we all know that titles don't really quite adequately describe what we do. If you could just kind of summarize what you do, and then we'll start with you.
Sure. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. It's wonderful to be here. I'm actually a new member, so I'm excited to get to know everyone. My name is Lena Nebel. I am the Chief Operating Officer at BFG Financial Advisors in Timonium, which is a wealth management firm. I'm also one of the shareholders and also lead advisor of the firm.
Teri Snowden, Vice President of Human Resources for Marriott International. I primarily work with the hotels in DC, Maryland, Virginia, and North Carolina.
Patricia Bradley. I serve as the Vice President of the Office of Inclusion and Institutional Equity, and we serve both faculty, staff, and students.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Martina Martin, Senior VP and Chief Operating Officer for United Way of Central Maryland. And our organization, what that means is the strategic direction of the organization, all of the governance, those of us who work all day long, HR, facilities, operations, statewide 211, and statewide association of United Ways.
You can take a video. Hi, I'm Alison Brown, President of the University of Maryland Medical Center Midtown campus, which is one hospital of our two hospitals, medical center, and wow, I mean, run the hospital, right? Run the hospital, and also have a real focus on engaging in community. And through workforce development, community partnerships, with a focus on improving health, particularly in West Baltimore.
Thank you. So we have a variety of industries represented. We have a variety of sizes of companies. But the one thing that all of our honorary companies have in common is this intentionality around developing women leaders. So I want to start off by just hearing how your organization is intentional about developing women in leadership. And actually, I'm going to skip around. So I think we will start with Martina.
At Towson University, we have several programs for women, but one that I would like to highlight and advertise and promote is one that I'm very proud of, and I hope that you all will go online and check it out. It's the Nancy Grasmick Leadership Institute. And one of the programs with the Nancy Grasmick Leadership Institute is an 8-week program that runs from January through May, and it's the Women in Leadership program. And in that program, like-minded women will gather together, learn leadership skills, exchange information, network. It's been a very, very important aspect for women in our community to really get together and to really share experiences that they've had. And so the Nancy Grasmick Leadership Institute, we're taking applications now.
So a little commercial.
I attended the course and it was fantastic. So, part of the things that we do that's intentional is what are the organizations that we're going to get involved in as it relates to, promoting female leadership, and taking that course was great. It was during the COVID year, so it was a little different, but they still made it successful and still had a wonderful time. So.
Well, Lena, while you got the mic.
That was my part right there.
We have put women in that program, in the year-long program, every single year since its inception on our staff. And it has led to great promotions across the organization. It's an excellent program if you have not looked into it, and she has not paid me to say that.
This is awesome. Anyone from the audience?
Well, let's keep it going, Teri. How about Marriott?
Just a little bit about Marriott. As you all know, we have a very diverse workforce of hourly associates that work in the hotels to senior leaders at our headquarters office or in the hotels. And one of the things that I think we've done that was pivotal in moving the needle, because we were always committed to it, but this is a friendly crowd. I'm going to go off script. I don't know that we were doing everything that we needed to do. And one of the things that we decided was that, because our company is based on, we treat everybody fairly and everybody has a place, and we realized that to move the needle, we had to acknowledge that we weren't all the same, and we needed to really identify those high potential leaders or employees, and then what can we do for them to help them to grow their careers. And it entailed making some hard decisions, and they could skip a step. So all those things that we would hear that they do on the golf course, and somebody gets promoted and we didn't know there was a job, we wanted to create opportunities for female leaders and have them skip some steps. And we call it our Emerging Leaders Program, where we've been doing it now, I think, for about 10 years. They've gone on to be superstars. And at the end of the day, we're not in the hospital. We're not doing heart surgery or, saving lives. And, but to ensure that individuals had the right training, the right business acumen, they had all the competencies to be great leaders, that's what we were looking for. And then we were able to sort of accelerate their careers.
One of you remembers that? Sure. So an example of what we built into the structure and culture of not only the University of Maryland Medical Center, but our entire health system is a formal mentoring program where women in leadership positions sign up and volunteer to serve as a mentor. And then women who are in the organization who have an interest in being a mentee submit what they're interested in, and they have a chance to choose a mentor from among the leadership team. It's been in place for almost 2 years and has really been influential in acknowledging and also conveying to the women in our organization that we have this mentoring program. It is for you to take advantage of. Yeah.
Thank you. So one of the trends that is the most concerning over the last 2 to 3 years is that women are leaving the workplace in record numbers, which means looking at these numbers down the road could have a negative impact. So I thought I'd start with you, Teri, since Marriott is one of the largest employers in the state. What are you doing to attract and retain, especially women?
Flexibility, flexibility, flexibility. And it's something, we talked about years ago. One of our senior leaders believed we should try this. And we just couldn't get any traction. And, at the time we had a lot of leaders that believed, if I don't see you, you're not working. And, I didn't want to tell them that I could be sitting at my desk on my Amazon account, just shopping away and I'm present. So we, obviously COVID moved the needle there, right? And forced all of us to work differently. And coming out of COVID with the war on talent, the need to, really be creative and recognize that no longer were we in the driver's seat. We needed to make lots of adjustments and make them quickly. And, flexibility has been the path that we've taken to do that. And, now I can say that, we have part-time females. Some people just want to, I need to put my kids on the bus in the morning. I want to see them when they get off. There's a big chunk of the day where they could still work, and we just needed to be thoughtful. Our schedules have been set, the AM shift, the PM shift, for so long that we literally could not mentally make the adjustment. And it's forced us to get there, and it's been a huge success for the company.
So Alison, I'm going to ask you the same question. What are you doing to attract and retain?
Well, I'll add to the comment about how can you be flexible, particularly in an environment where there is a lot of structure, right? A 24/7 operation where people need to be there to deliver the services 24/7. I think what I would look at my colleagues who are with me here in the audience, we have become more intentional about how do we approach people who have an interest in career development. So rather than just assuming someone's going to say, I'm ready to move to the next job, we're more actively engaged in what career goals people have and then help build a path to help them get there, to from entry-level positions to becoming nurses, becoming nurse practitioners, et cetera, so that we spend a whole lot more time in leadership development and career coaching.
So Patricia, how are you doing this with your student population? How are you identifying potential women leaders?
So again, through leadership programs, one of the departments that I have is our Center for Student Diversity, and we have a women's coordinator. I think it was maybe 3 weeks ago, we had a Women in Leadership Conference that we invited all of our students to. And it was phenomenal, not because of the student participation only, but also because we invited our board of directors, we invited our cabinet members, so that those students could see who was representing them on campus. I think that oftentimes our young women, they can't see themselves in positions until they see someone that looks like them who's also pursuing that position. So I think that just by being present in their lives and telling them, you can do this too.
Thank you for that. So it's great to hear what you're doing, and I'm always about, all right, but the buck stops somewhere. How are you keeping your teams accountable? But I'm going to go back to you, Teri, because you mentioned a lot of great things, but how are you keeping your team accountable for the work of bringing in this talent?
We have a joke, what gets measured gets done, but it's true. And we have metrics that help to keep us focused. So there are financial incentives tied to it. We do an annual survey every year, and the data from that survey is also critical. We report, with our board of directors, we have a diversity committee, and we have to report to them quarterly as well. So there is ongoing tracking of our numbers and data, and it's no longer a conversation that we need to whisper about or have in the back room, but it's a conversation we have openly, and there are a lot of efforts that are put towards, and I'll say that I dropped into a training. There was a financial training class yesterday, and I stopped by, and many of the leaders from our hotels in DC, Maryland, and Virginia were there attending. And as I sat and looked around the room, it was just heartwarming to see that it was such an impressive crowd, but it was a very diverse crowd. And I could see that, our efforts are really paying off in ways that we don't always get to visually see.
Thank you. So one of the things, if you've been around men, they are really good advocates of themselves. Men in leadership, they are so good at promoting themselves. And women, we could do a lot better, right? So I thought I would ask, and I'll start with you, Lena. How can women be better advocates for themselves?
I think it's finding that tribe that supports you. Behind every successful woman, there's a tribe that is encouraging them, that's cheerleading them. And that can be a mentor, that can be somebody who created a path for you. I know for me personally, when I got out of college and entered the financial industry, it's a male-dominated industry. There's about less than 20% of female advisors in our industry. So the woman that I worked for helped me in how can I find my voice? How can I communicate this message to other individuals? How can I walk into a room that is primarily male-dominated and be heard and be seen? So I think finding those mentors, reaching out, having those study groups, connecting in organizations like this, and finding those advocates is crucial.
So Martina, why don't you share with us how women can be better advocates, and then maybe give an example of a time you've advocated for a woman or somebody advocated for you.
So when we talk about advocating, and I'd like to go to another question that you're asking as well. There are old studies that show that if men meet 60% of the qualifications of a job, they're ready to take it. But women want to wait until they hit 100% of the qualifications. And, can women advocate? Do women advocate for themselves? And I'd like to unpack that a little and ask you in the audience, if you're in that camp that believe that you have to have 100% before you can take the job, why is that? Is it the family that you grew up in? a culture, or an ethnicity, a set of family values? Is it part of what you've been told all your life about who you are and what you can do and what you can't do? And if it's none of the above or tied into some of the above, are you an anxious person? Do you lack confidence? Is there something about you that does it? And the best way that you can go from there is to find someone who will spend the time mentoring you about how to overcome either what you've learned all your life or what is naturally a part of who you are. And that really can help you learn how to begin to advocate for yourself. But to your point about having a tribe, you need a tribe behind you to do it. But in order to do it, you have to look at what the root cause is that's keeping you from being comfortable advocating for yourself in the first place.
So why don't you pass the mic down to Patricia? I want to just ask if an example of a time, and also Martina asked that part to you as well, that you advocated for a woman or somebody advocated for you. We like to see real world examples, right? It makes us all feel good and part of that. Okay.
So I previously served in the military, so the example that I would like to share is that I served as a transportation officer initially, and I had the goal of going to law school. And so there was a general officer of the Transportation Corps coming to visit our base. And I did not know that she was my mentor at the time. I didn't really define it, but there was a colonel who was both my mentor and she was my sponsor. And she was doing this all behind closed doors. I didn't even know it was happening. But the general officer was coming on base, and they had a West Point graduate who was an ordnance officer, not even transportation. This general officer was transportation like me. They had an ordnance officer from West Point who was a white male, and he was going to escort the general officer for a week. So my mentor was in a meeting and said, and at the time I was Corey, why is Lieutenant Corey escorting General Brown? She's a transportation lieutenant. Why are you having an ordnance lieutenant escort? And so there was a nomination process. I had to go through the interview. Both of us interviewed for the position, and I prevailed. And so I escorted this general officer for a week. Young lieutenant, young dumb. So the general officer, he says to me, he says, so what are your career aspirations? And I'm like, when my commitment is up, I'm out. I don't like the woods, I don't like the field, I don't like kids. And so he said, what do you plan on doing? And I said, I want to go to law school. And he said, okay. He said, well, how are you going to pay for it? And me, young dumb, I don't know, I'm going to get a loan because my undergrad had been paid for. I was on a scholarship. And so I escorted him for the entire week. At the end of the week, he said, give my aide your contact information. My aide is going to reach out to you next week. There's a program called the Funded Legal Education Program. I want you to apply for it, and I'm going to sponsor you. I applied. There were only 15 nationwide selected. I was, I think that year, the only woman who was accepted. And I ended up going to law school. Military paid for it, and I switched over to the JAG Corps. So that is my example of military.
Jump in and then add to that, because hearing stories like that are two things. One is somebody was advocating for you and you didn't even know about it, which just sort of reminds us we all have responsibility. We don't have to wear a certain label to advocate for one another. Every time that we hear about a position of leadership, send a note. Pull somebody to the side. Have you heard about? Because that's what we need to do day in and day out. So I love hearing examples about this.
So you had asked me about, and then I'm going to talk about somebody that I advocated for. So several years ago, a woman joined our organization as special assistant to the president. And she worked a lot with me on governance, strategic planning, etc. Extremely bright. I considered her to be overqualified for the position that she was in. And she's a woman of color, but very introverted. Very, very smart, but very, very introverted. And so the way my colleagues on the executive management team experienced her was sort of like that. And I saw so much in her, the intelligence, the capabilities, the commitment to do what's right, and the commitment to be successful no matter what it took. And so I had advocated that we expand her role a little bit. And then we began getting into equity, all forms of equity in our organization, racial, financial, educational, social equity. And she had a deep interest in really starting up our equity journey as an organization. And so, again, my colleagues hesitated because she tended to be a fairly quiet person. But I kept pushing for that, as my CEO did as well, and we promoted her to Director of Equity and Executive Office Operations. And she built out with us this absolutely fabulous roadmap with 4 parts to it on a long-term equity journey that takes into consideration, 1, who we are as a people in the organization and what we do in our culture. Secondly, the kind of impact that our United Way is having across the region. Our board and our volunteers, what we look like. Are they the voice of the community in both directions? And then the kind of partners and vendors that we use. Suffice to say that she became a director, and then there was the opportunity to go a little further. And I advocated that she jump from a director over senior director and become an associate vice president. And that is what she is today. And she is soon moving out of doing some of the operational work that she's been doing in the governance space. And she will become fully our chief equity person in the organization. But again, just because somebody is quiet or introverted by nature, there's still waters run deep. And I encourage you in your own organizations, regardless of where you are you overlooking a woman or even a man because they're a little bit quiet? They may advocate for themselves in different ways than a very extroverted person does. But do you have someone in that space who could be the next great leader that could help transform your organization?
Thank you. Thank you for that advocacy. How did you add to that?
Just 2 quick stories. One personal. When earlier in my career at the University of Maryland Medical Center, I was interested in expanding the responsibilities that I had. And the gentleman who had the responsibility for marketing and communications left the organization. There was discussion about we need to recruit someone to replace him. And I thought, I really actually like to try that. I'd like to do it. I'd like to raise my hand and say, so I went and one of my graduate school friends said, if you have an interest, take somebody out to lunch. So I took one of the senior executives out to lunch, and I said, I know we're making this change. The relationship between this function and what I have responsibility for is a lot of synergy. Would you give me the opportunity to try this and take on this scope? And he ended up advocating for me with the then CEO, and who was like, well, what does Alison know about marketing and communications? But I went to school and I learned, and it was a lesson for me and a lesson I've shared with others about you need to raise your hand and say, I have an interest, express your interest, and then look for someone to sponsor you. Story for advocating, I think about how I advocate for people every day. So 2 weeks ago, one of our leaders in our organization called me and asked me for my opinion about someone to join an initiative to lead a big project for the medical center. And I said, you need to look at fill in the blank, this physician on our faculty. And he said, why? I said, she's smart, she's eager, she takes responsibility, she gets work done. Take a look at her. So yesterday, I got an email from this physician saying, thank you. I'm so excited to have been named to this position. Thank you for giving my name forward and for having the confidence that you have in me, and I'm excited to take on this new leadership role. Yeah, it's cool every day.
And Rhonda, what I would add to that, again, working on human resources in the hiring and space, what I find is many of the females, when we make an offer, they accept the offer. No questions asked. A guy with half your qualifications wondering why he's not getting a car, a driver, and stock options. And again, you want to be thoughtful about it. You want to have some solid rationale for it. But, when you know you're bringing a lot to the table, don't be shy about asking for a fair and competitive offer. And I will tell you, more often than not these days, they all get approved, so. Ask for those increases.
So it seems that when you're in a really small organization or if you're self-employed, you don't really have the advantage. You don't have women examples. You don't have the sort of mentorship opportunities as you would in a larger organization. So Lena, I'd like to ask you, how can a woman who is in a very small company or who is self-employed develop their leadership skills?
That's a great question. I was thinking about when you mentioned of raising your hand. A lot of us don't raise our hand and try to get nominated for that position. And I think about when I started in my career and I joined an organization so I could be more involved, and I wanted to be involved in the community, and I wanted to be able to hone in on some of my leadership skills. And I met somebody at the time who's now my business partner and here supporting me. My first male ally actually nominated me to be president of the Maryland chapter of the Financial Planning Association. Our board was primarily male. The members were primarily male, so I was like, I don't think I can do that. I don't think I'm the right person. But sometimes we don't see what everybody else sees in us. And you need somebody to be able to bring out those qualities and say, you got this, you don't even sweat it. And so I was the first female president of the Maryland Chapter Association, Financial Planning Association, and I saw how it led the way for more women to get into that organization. It led more women to be onto that board. And so it's finding those communities. Communities are key. And it doesn't have to be networking within your industry. It can be participating and volunteering in your church organization. It can be coaching. I was a cookie mama for many years with the Girl Scouts. And in addition, you feel my pain.
That's hard
work. In addition to housing hundreds of cookies in the house and not being able to eat those, it allowed me to be with younger girls and allow them to, think about their goals and how they can support each other and how can they empower each other and be creative and make the important decisions and implement what they're looking to do. It was very impactful and had nothing to do with my job. It had to do with being involved in another organization, and that can be challenging. So again, coaching, volunteering, all of those things help to bring out your leadership skills, and the more that you can talk to people, the more that you can get involved, the more that leadership is going to come out as well.
So Lena, you brought up a good point, which is that you have a male ally. And I want to acknowledge how important that is, because you cannot do the work that needs to be done without male allies. Lots of them, lots more of them. So I see some of our allies in the room, and I'm so happy to have them in the room. You're going to hear some comments that make you uncomfortable, and that's okay. To have them. And I want to talk about what that looks like. How does male allyship show up in the workplace? And Martina, I'd like to ask you, so what does that look like?
So I had the best of all worlds early in my career. I had a male ally and mentor of my life who was married to a wonderful woman who was ahead of her time. And so I started working for this man while I was still in college. He became my mentor, and he stayed with me through his entire life. He died at age 88, having shuttered his last 2 public relations accounts at age 86. He saw in me the qualities that I did not recognize in myself. He gave me assignments. This is early career in PR marketing and advertising. He made me do work in accounts that I didn't even know that I could do, tested my mettle along the way, and told me it's important that you learn a little bit about everything. Not that you have to go deep in it, but you have to learn it well enough, because he said someday you're going to be managing it and supervising it, so you have to know it well enough. Now think about the fact, this was the early 1980s. It was a different time, for those in the room that are of a certain age. So if he and his wife were still alive, they'd be over 100 years old. She, on the other hand, was in accounting and finance. So think about a woman, a middle-aged woman in accounting and finance in the 1980s. So she used to take me out to dinner and tell me what it was really like in this town and how I would be treated and how I needed to handle it. And the two of them together were a force to be reckoned with. And so what I would encourage you, where you can find a great male ally, if that person can be coupled with another partner who is their female, their female companion, wife, whatever the case may be, you could have the best of all worlds because it would help round you out totally.
Anybody else want to add to that? Male allyship, how does it show up? What does it feel like in an organization?
I think it feels like a lot of support, quite honestly. I mean, I look around and I have a few of my male allies here that represent, some of our leadership, and I see what they do day in and day out, and being able to support us, encourage us. They're, like you said, they see the qualities that you don't see in yourself, and they're willing to take that extra support, take that extra time, and give you that encouragement that you need, which I think is crucial. And unfortunately, I think we see the opposite of what male allyship looks like versus what it should. And so I think the industry and the time that we're in is a little bit different now, to where people are making a change. They are trying to say, what about her, what about her, what about her?
So what is the opposite? So we know what men know not to do. What's the opposite of male allyship?
I think it's when you have more of that toxic environment, to where they're not supporting your organizations. They're not supporting you wanting to go and further your career and further your aspirations. And I sadly have more of those experiences than I do of what allyship looks like. And so I can see it with my partners on how they support us and how they try to create opportunities and being able to support. My colleague and I travel to St. Paul's, and we speak to the investment club of girls and what career in financial services look like, and trying to get that into the boys' school and having them be our cheerleader is important.
Yeah. So what do you think is the most significant barrier that women face in attaining the C-suite level or being appointed to a board? Patricia, I'll start with you on that.
I think I'd focus a lot on the nonprofit boards that women are often asked to serve on, and nonprofit boards that come without compensation versus being on boards with compensation, so that uncompensated labor. I think that oftentimes we look at C-suite delayed as C-suite denied, and what I mean by that is many of us, we make a conscious choice about our careers, and many of us may choose to have family, spouse, and when you have young kids, it's hard to give 100% to your job. And so you have to really make a decision. You have to be honest with yourself. Not to say that you can't do both, and many do both and do both very well. But I had to be honest with myself, and I had to admit that I could do both, but I couldn't do both at the same time very well. And so I made a decision that I passed on a lot of opportunities, and I regretted it for many, many years. I regretted the opportunities that I passed on because I chose family first. But that was C-suite delayed, not C-suite denied. So during that time, while I delayed those opportunities, I continued to grow. I continued to learn, be a self-learner. And so, you prepare yourself for that future opportunity, even if you choose something else in the beginning.
That's great. So you turned something that would have been a barrier into a positive.
Yes.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you saying that. Earlier in my career, I was thinking in order to move up, I was going to have to leave the organization. And I explored some other opportunities that would have required our family to move. And my husband made the mistake of mentioning to my daughter, who was 11 at the time, that mom's looking at a job in St. Louis. And she's like, that would ruin my life. So I'm like, okay. But it was a conscious choice, right, to pass on this opportunity that would have required very disruptive, and to look at my daughter and my son and say, okay, we're staying here, but it was just delayed. right? Because now scroll forward, there were opportunities to be considered to take on more, and I was able to, yeah.
Thank you. Anybody else want to add to that? All right. So a lot of times when women are not being promoted, not getting those opportunities, we hear, well, they just need to upgrade their skills. You know, they need some upskilling. So let's just sort of go down the line, and we'll start with you, Lena. Name the one skill. We just tactical around here. But one skill that women should own if they want to be promoted.
I honestly, I think vulnerability is key. I think that's one of the hardest skills for a woman to have, because we don't want to admit when we've made a mistake. We don't want to ask for help. Sometimes we don't want to show our real side before fear of, being too emotional. But what I've come to find out is that being vulnerable, being authentic, is what allows you to be more respected and makes you a better leader that way.
I love that. I love that.
For me, it is really about being authentic. And I think that, when I think about my career early on, I felt like I should sit up and pretend I knew everything they were talking about, and I had no clue. And, there's nothing, there was no reason for me not to ask questions. And, often now I find myself the first one to ask a question, because it doesn't, I don't think my identity or what I'm capable of doing is tied to that. And I think that our questions are so insightful. More often than not, there's somebody else in the room that also has that question and just not brave enough to ask it. So authenticity for me is critical.
I would say having the courage to really own your power and own your title. So many times I've found that, as a VP serving on the cabinet, we would all have one-on-ones. And some of the male VPs, they would always schedule a one-on-one for me to come to their office. And I started realizing, I'm like, wait a minute, why are they always scheduling me to come to their office? Or I would know that they were meeting in person, and they would schedule a one-on-one with me, and it would be remote. And I'm like, okay, yeah. So you have to own your power and say, no, you can come to my office this week. I'm located on the second floor. We have to own it, and we don't have to feel that it's being aggressive, because I think that's the title that we get. Oh, she's aggressive. No, I'm not aggressive. I'm a VP just like you. Right. So we have to own it.
For me, it's critical thinking combined with a Socratic approach. So inquiry over that pushiness or advocacy. And for those of you who are the lawyers in the room or Jesuit trained, you know that I love the Jesuit trained. So, when you think about critical thinking, it's the facts, it's the observations, it's the evidence. But then you get into thinking about the rational, the skeptical, everything else. And if you're doing critical thinking, you have to commit to standards of ethical excellence and the rigorousness of actually commanding them. And then you have to keep the ego in check. And so for me, if you can really upscale in critical thinking, but then stop and, to your point, ask questions rather than push, that's what I would recommend.
So I think a really important skill is learning how to bring voice to your accomplishments and learning how to point out how you contribute, the results you have helped achieve, and not wait for someone to tap you on the shoulder to notice your work. And it really is about learning how to speak in a way that says, I'd like to have an opportunity to share, the result of this great project. And that also brings confidence in raising your hand and asking for that next opportunity.
So Alison, that leads me to another concern. One other than women leaving in great numbers is remote work where you're behind a screen. Women have always been challenged with being heard in the same way that men are being heard. So how do we get to a place with remote work? How do we show up and be heard? And I know that my time is on the short. To get through this question, I have one last question.
I don't know the answer to that question.
So,
Patricia, do you want to give us that?
Well, I think we show up just like everyone else does with remote work. I mean, remote work with COVID was a blessing in so many ways, and still traumatic, but it brought remote work to light. And I think that as women, I think the only advice I would give about remote work is to understand that remote work doesn't necessarily mean relaxed work, and it doesn't mean that it's, if you're remote from home, that it's a daycare. It still means you need to come to work and not be distracted. Beyonce may say we woke up like this. No, we didn't wake up like this. It takes time. You gotta prepare. You gotta fix your face. I've actually had meetings where I've had individuals come on remote work with scarves, and I hate to say it, and I was appalled because you wouldn't come to the regular work environment that way. So I think you just have to show up still presenting as you are professionals.
And also still pushing through to make sure that people aren't having meetings without you. Because it's so much easier not to include people in a remote environment where everything's a Teams meeting and you feel looped out. So just making sure you're keeping your ear to the ground, so to speak, and making sure you're included. So I just want to end it with just, and I won't be able to get to everybody, but I just want the advice that you would give to the next generation of female leaders. And I will start with you, Alison.
I would say be brave.
Martina?
Trust your gut, trust your instincts, trust your intuition. Learn to do that early in life.
Establish your own board of directors. And what I mean by that, you need to have a financial advisor, you need to have a life coach or a therapist, you need to have a stylist, someone to tell you, nah, that outfit's too dark.
It's not your mother.
You need to have a speechwriter, you need to have that mentor and that sponsor and know what the difference is between the two.
I would say take risks. Don't play it safe. When I think about the remarks that Alison gave earlier when she described, I would say most of us in the room, we tend to hold back and, wait until, we've checked every box to move forward. But think beyond the prototypical options ahead of you and, try something new and challenge yourself. So.
I think about how all of us put everybody else above ourselves, whether it's our kids, our spouses, our partners, our coworkers, our friends, our pets. Make yourself a priority. Take care of your mind, your body, your soul, your everything. And doing that will make you a better leader. So definitely take care of yourself and make yourself a priority.
Well, thank you very much for this conversation. It was great. Thank you for your attention. I'm going to turn it back over to you.